Okay. Integrity, belief under pressure. First off, I want to start reading in Daniel, starting in chapter 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And Yahweh gave Jehoiakim, king of Judea, into his hands with part of the vessels of the house of Yahweh, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his Elohim. He brought the vessels into the treasure house of his Elohim. And the king spoke unto Appanaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children whom was no blemish, but well favored, skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat, and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. But Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now Yahweh had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat, and water to drink. Then let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servant. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, Yahweh gave them knowledge and skill and all learning and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. The king communed with them, and among them all was found none like Daniel and Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king, and in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the 1st year of King Cyrus. We'll be looking at the topic of integrity as found in the book of Daniel. Webster defines integrity as firm adherence to a code of especially moral or artistic values, incorruptibility, unimpaired condition, soundness, the quality or state of being complete or undivided. Completeness. It is closely related to the word honesty. It's defined as doing what you say and saying what you do. It is where word and deed are in agreement. It is sticking to your guns no matter what the circumstances. It sounds easy, but it's not. What do you do when the pressure to change builds in your life? The problem we have is physical, emotional, and spiritual pressure. Daniel found himself in a pressure situation. His life was in turmoil at every level. His emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being was being threatened by world events. Physically, he had been taken away from his familiar surroundings by a conquering king. He uprooted from Jerusalem. He was taken to Babylon as a slave to live out the rest of his life in service to King Nebuchadnezzar. Perhaps he was to be well-treated slave, but a slave nonetheless. Emotionally, he was in turmoil. My next move for an example, my next move out of the house will be when they take my body to the burial. That's how bad I hate moving. Daniel was taken forcibly from his home to a foreign land in chains. We cannot imagine how he was feeling. The emotional stress from such an event would be overwhelming. Spiritually, add all this to seeing your place of worship sacked and ruined. His place of worship was destroyed, and its valuables were taken as spoil back to Babylon. Verses 2 says, "And Yahweh delivered Jehoram, king of Judah, into the hand along with some of the articles from the temple of Yahweh. These he carried off to the temple of his Elohim in Babylon, and put in the treasure house of his Elohim." Imagine someone coming into our place of worship and destroying and robbing and maybe even killing someone here. It would be a very stressed out situation for us. Our lives would be in turmoil if that ever happened here. The sin of the people of Yahweh had finally taken its toll. Judgment had come. After all the warnings, Yahweh in his time allowed his people to be conquered. But in the midst of the judgment and turmoil, Yahweh had a divine plan for Daniel. Daniel's potential. Daniel was evidently a very talented individual. He had a great many assets in his favor. He had what we would call potential. Evidently, he was intelligent, good-looking, and in great shape, much like me. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he wasn't anywhere near like me. The court official was asked to fill an order for the king. Verse 4 says the court official was to bring the king young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. Daniel was chosen for the prestigious position. It was going to be an easier life than an ordinary slave. He was to serve the king's court. It was a place of power and influence. What a great opportunity. But there was a snag. Daniel was being asked to fit in. He was to become, for all intents and purposes, a Babylonian. Verse 4 says, he was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Daniel was in a difficult, stressful situation that was going to test his faith and principles at a fundamental level. The Israelite was to change into a Babylonian. How was he to meet this challenge? One way to deal with the pressures of our beliefs is to surrender. He could have sold out, simply give up and bow to the peer pressure, circumstances, or whatever is compelling you to change your belief. They're pressuring everybody today in our America. They want you to believe what they want. The same situation. Nobody would have blamed him. He was out of town. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, they always say. I find many believers are willing to give in, or compromise, or explain away the word of Yahweh. It would have been easy for Daniel to go along with the program. With his gifts and talents, he would have been successful in the king's court. Another way he could have handled it was to lie about what he was doing, keep the court officials and the king in the dark, and do everything behind their back. No one would have been the wiser. Just eat and drink what you want in keeping with Yahweh's law, but pretend to be obedient. Fake everyone out. Perhaps this would have been a little more complicated, but again, the easy way out, as it would be the easy way out as well as dishonest. It would not have honored Yahweh while trying to honor Yahweh. Many are willing to tell a little white lie as long as the circumstances warrant the lie. We like to put sin in order of degrees. Some sins are worse than others in our eyes. It's okay to break the little ones, but not the big ones. Yahweh does not desire selective obedience, nor does he recognize degrees of sin. So Daniel proposes this. He stood his ground by offering a solution. Daniel offered a win-win solution to his problem. He found an answer that allowed him to obey Yahweh and obey the laws of the king. First, he resolved not to defile himself or disobey Yahweh. In verse 8 it says, "But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way." In the cadets' prayer, it's said every Sunday in the chapel at West Point, "Make us choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be contented with half-truth when whole truth can be won. Endow us with courage that is born of loyalty to all that is noble and worthy, that scorns to compromise with vice and injustice, and knows no fear when right and truth are in jeopardy." Daniel had precepts in place before the situation arose. There's a definition of precepts as a rule, instruction, a principle that guides somebody's action, especially one that guides moral behavior. Daniel's belief system allowed him to respond to the menu with confidence, not because he knew it all, but because Yahweh did. The second thing Daniel did was offer a solution that was a win-win. Test what I say and see if I'm right. Verse 12 and 13, "Please test your servant for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." Here's a story. A friend wanted a boat more than anything. His wife kept refusing, but he bought one anyways. I'll tell you what he told her. In the spirit of compromise, why don't you name the boat? Being a good sport, she accepted. And when the husband went to the dock for the maiden voyage, the name of it he saw painted on the side of the boat was "For Sale." Daniel went in with confidence because he knew where he stood, and he knew Yahweh would honor him if he honored Yahweh. The response was that the official appeared in verse 14. So he agreed, and tested them for 10 days. Then we have the performance outcome. The outcome of the test was that they, Daniel and his friends, were successful. Most in this room knew that before I even told you. Verse 18 says, "And at the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief officials presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them and found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, and Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and the enchanters in his whole kingdom." They looked better, had responded better than anyone in the entire kingdom. It's an amazing testament to Daniel and his friends, right? No, wrong. Remember, it's not about Daniel. It's about Yahweh. Verse 17 says, "To these 4 young men, Yahweh gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds." Yahweh worked in a powerful way in his life because he was willing to let Yahweh work in his life. There's 2 questions at this point. First, to the parents out there watching this video or whatever, what precepts have you taught your children? I'm not talking about grandparents and grandpas and grandmas, but to parents. If your child were put in a difficult, stressful situation involving peer pressure or circumstances beyond their control, do they have the equipment necessary to meet the challenge? It is not only your responsibility to teach them, but to show them by your actions. It's never too late to start, but tomorrow may be too late. My next question is to everybody, what have you been taught, and have you made up your mind ahead of time how you will deal with the certain situations that will no doubt come into your life? Is it too late if you wait until it happens? You need to make the decision now how you will respond later. Daniel didn't all of a sudden become dedicated to Yahweh. He lived his life to Yahweh, and he was determined to do so no matter what. Can the same be said for us in our life? You know, it's been said, the swift wind of compromise is a lot more devastating than the sudden jolt of misfortune. It is not too late to begin living a life of integrity. Stop playing at church. Stop playing at worship. Stop playing obedience to Yahweh's word and begin to match word with your deeds. I'm not saying Yahweh will deliver you from your pain and suffering or even your circumstances, but he will enable you to live your life for him. Verse 21 says, "And Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus." Yahweh did not miraculously free Daniel from slavery, but he used him in a powerful way. A man by the name of William Barclay, and he wrote a book, The Apostles' Creed for Every Man, said, "Jesus did not say, 'Discuss me.' He said, 'Follow me.' We do not make terms with Christ, we surrender to Christ. We do not compromise with Christ, we submit to Christ. Christianity does not mean being interested in Jesus Christ. It means taking the same oath as princes take to the kings or queens in a coronation ceremony and saying, 'I am your liege, man of life and limb. In faith and truth will I bear to you against all manner of folk. So help me God.' Are you ready to begin today?" Yahweh bless.